Yanis Varoufakis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for all the work you do with open democracy.
Thank you. The first thing I wanted to ask you, I want to dive right in.
Sure.
What's your vision for economic global governance?
Governance is not the same thing as government because, global government sounds megalomaniac, like James Bond villain stuff. But when it comes to governance, we already have governance, except it's not working. So we have one currency that is effectively dominating most transactions. It's the US dollar. And now what we see is a major tension between the exorbitant privilege of the dollar and the shrinking of the US economy in relation to the rest of the world. And Trump comes in and says, and there's an element of a logic there in all the madness. He says, if you want my currency, I'm going to have to remain dominant, and I'm going to remain dominant by blowing up all the multilateral organizations and dealing with each one of you separately so as to allow myself to remain hegemonic, even though my economy is going to be less than 10% of the global economy. So I think we're going to say Trump is right, and I prefer to die than do that. Or we need a new Bretton Woods, a new way of organizing money internationally, transactions. So the idea of a clearing union is really very simple. We're not, God forbid, we don't want a common currency in the sense of all of us having the same money in our pockets. But what would be nice to have, and this is the basic idea of John Maynard Keynes from 1944, which we are now updating, massively updating, is that we have a common unit of account. And all our trade is denominated in that common unit of account. It's not American, it's not British, but it is something like a kind of synthetic currency to which all of us contribute, like the SDRs of the IMF, for those of you who know what that is. For those of you who don't, doesn't matter. And imagine a situation where all trade is denominated in that, and where we have an agreement that any country that has more than a certain percentage of its GDP in deficit or a surplus is taxed a little bit per transaction. And all that goes into a common fund from which we invest in parts of the world where they need investment in order to rebalance, both in terms of the environment and in terms of financial transactions. That's the basic idea. That would work instead of the dominance of the dollar and Trump.
Would that be attached to a kind of international trade organization, or?
Well, the original idea was the International Monetary Fund. This is why it was created. It was created to play that role. But unfortunately, John Maynard Keynes' idea of an international clearing union was rejected by the Americans because they said, well, we are the only creditor nation. The dollar is the only surviving currency after the war, during the war, so it's going to be it. But of course, they lost their capacity to balance the world economy the moment America became a deficit country, and that was the end of Bretton Woods. And since then, we had financialization, we had austerity, we had all those things that destroy societies and the planet.
What's wrong in terms of global justice with how the economy is organized at the moment?
Where does one start? The International Clearing Union is not going to fix everything. What it's going to fix is a tendency of global capitalism to create imbalances which then blow up, and you have huge austerity in certain countries and problematic growth in others. Growth that is bad for the environment, bad for society, and unsustainable. The main problem we have internationally is capitalism. It is a machine that generates simultaneously immense wealth and immense misery from the same production line. It's a machine that creates crisis. And because it's so imbalanced, this machinery of capitalism, that, think about it, I mean, bankers create money out of nothing, thin air. And the more they create, the more profits they have, until the whole thing breaks down, and then the little people are asked to bail them out. You have a situation where, think about it, workers are contributing to pension funds. Every month, a few pounds, a few dollars, yen, and so on. But that accumulates, it becomes a huge pension fund. That pension fund then controls all the corporations in the world, okay? And the managers of those pension funds that are themselves answering to shareholders, they can destroy CEOs, boards of directors. So the leaders of business are enthralled, and the only thing they care about is to satisfy the pension funds. The way to do that is by going through periodic culling of personnel, okay, and downsizing. Every time they announce the downsizing, their shares go up because the pension funds buy. So in effect, you have a working class, and global, international working class, which is periodically being culled, even though their contributions are keeping the whole beast going. There's something profoundly unsustainable about that. And given that it is this machinery that is constantly feeding the fossil fuel industry, you've got a simultaneous social crisis and planetary crisis.
Part of your vision is to channel the funds raised into a global Green New Deal, is that right?
There are three things we need to do. One is the International Clearing Union to prevent global imbalances between trade flows and capital flows. Secondly, we need public investment banks to grab the excess liquidity, the excess money, and put it into good use in technological change that is amenable to the green transition that we all need. And thirdly, very importantly, changing property rights. So we have a proposal for a universal basic dividend, not income. We think that let's start with 10% of all shares of large companies should go into a global equity fund from which the dividends that accumulate then are distributed in the form of universal basic dividend, so everybody gets the same, because in a sense we have created that capital together. So and if you increase this from 10 to 20 to 30%, eventually you end up with a market-based socialism.
And would that be on a global scale?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they are global. Look at Google. I mean, you can't do it in Britain and not do it in Ireland and not Cambodia.
Some things that you said I thought were very inspiring about having transnational organisations, transnational collective bargaining. Could you talk a bit about that?
Well, firstly, the bankers are internationalists. They're completely anti-nationalist. They don't care whether another banker is German, Japanese or American. They have a remarkable solidarity between themselves in the way that they make everybody else pay for their losses. The fascists are internationalizing. Think of Steve Bannon. Yeah? Only the progressives are not. Moreover, if you look at the way in which, even within the European Union, where we'll have freedom of movement and we'll have some basic standards for labor processes and for the environment and so on, still you have immense exploitation of certain areas and certain people within the European Union. What is lacking is a pan-European trades union that looks after Hungarians and Germans, Italians and Scandinavians. Internationalization is the only alternative to a kind of financialized globalization which is inimical both to societies and to the planet.
Congratulations. You've been
thank you.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about what it's like, your new party, what it's like, DiEM25.
Well, it was after the surrender of the Syriza government in 2015 that some of us threw our hands up in the air and said, now what do we do? And instead of setting up national parties, we set up DiEM25, a pan-European movement for the democratization of Europe and moving towards a European Green New Deal and an anti-austerity plan that would work. And then from there we started creating what we called electoral wings, like political parties that belong nevertheless to the DiEM pan-European movement, and one of them, Mera25, Mera means DiEM or day in Greek. We managed to get elected. We started from zero funding. We started with a campaign of demonization and character assassination by the systemic media. We got in. We have a small parliamentary party, 9 members of parliament, but we're doing very serious work in parliament and outside of parliament, opposing the new Tory government that was elected last July.
We probably have a general election coming around the corner.
Indeed, November, I estimate.
Is that you predicting November?
Yes.
Let's see.
Let's see.
Do you think Labour has a chance of getting in? What
Absolutely. The strategy should be what it is. That the only way of getting a hard Brexit off the table is by electing Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, leading a Labour government. And the Labour government must put to the people 2 non-destructive, meaningful options. One that keeps Britain in the customs union, and I would like the single market as well, and the other is to remain. Neither of them is destructive. One of them respects the original referendum verdict of leaving without destroying everything, and the other one is remain. But I think at the same time, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour should put forward, as part of the same package, as part of its manifesto, a proposal for a constitutional assembly that rewrites the constitution, or writes for the first time, the constitution of the United Kingdom, where the relation between the EU and the UK becomes a chapter of that. Because let's face it, what we've been witnessing the last 2 years in Britain is a complete breakdown of the UK constitution, not just the UK constitution, but also the business model. You know, low wages, low productivity, low working standards, low standards in general. The cheapness model of Walmart has become, Tory Britain's business model, and that has broken down. And therefore, in a sense, the only sensible option for Britain now, for a democratic Britain that turns a page on the failed Thatcherite, Blairite model, is that only a Corbyn government can provide.
And what kinds of policy agenda do you think?
Well, already, if you look at the 2017 manifesto, it contains many of the important ideas that have to be brought forward. The constitutional assembly process is one that I would add. Let's not forget that Brexit is an English problem, not a Scottish or Irish problem. It is the result of the way in which the incomplete devolution of Tony Blair has allowed the Scots a sense of belonging to a democratic polity that is represented by the Scottish Parliament. Similarly with Wales, with the Welsh Assembly, the English have nothing. They feel bereft, especially the English white male working class, broken down industrialization model, and total abandonment by London. This is what Brexit is about. It's got nothing to do with the European Union, in my view. And that needs to be addressed by giving a voice to people, by allowing them to be part of the constitutional assembly process, where a number of questions are being asked regarding the way they want to be governed in England, in Wales, in Scotland, what kind of union. I would like the English in particular and the Irish to understand that the Good Friday Agreement, which everybody cherishes, is a first step towards a new kind of sovereignty, joint sovereignty, not post-Westphalian sovereignty. All these things, the party that offers the Brits an opportunity to write down a democratic constitution is going to be the party that is hegemonic over the next 20 years.
I just want to get back, you said about Labour, they needed to offer, with the whole Brexit thing, basically a soft Brexit option and a Remain option. Should they campaign? What way should they campaign for that?
I think that Jeremy Corbyn is being supremely sensible. Supremely sensible. He says, look, folks, I campaigned for Remain, reluctantly, because of all the criticism I have for the EU. But because on the principle of minimizing harm, I campaigned for Remain. Leave one. We cannot treat those people as vermin. We have to treat them with respect. So what I'm going to say to them is, okay, look, over the last 3 years we found out that the hard Brexit will be catastrophic for your communities, for everybody. But I respect the fact that you may want to leave nevertheless. So here is a deal that would make leaving possible without catastrophic damage to your communities. And here is the alternative option of remaining. You choose. I'm not going to campaign because neither of those are catastrophic. And both of them respect the urgent need for dialogue between leavers and remainers, and for progressive leavers and progressive remainers to remain together. I'm not going to campaign. If I were Jeremy, I would say that, a couple of days before the referendum, I'll tell you what I'm going to vote for. Because as a politician, I can't say I'm not telling you. But that's not the same thing as campaigning.
Yanis Varoufakis, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
That was brilliant.